Hello everybody and welcome back to another Commander Showcase. Today we are looking at Horobi, Death's Wail, as our Commander Showcase today. Horobi is a really interesting creature. It is a 2 black, 2 colorless, 4/4 with flying, and whenever a creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, destroy that creature. That means we could use things like instants to immediately target an opponent's creature to instantaneously kill it. Or as you can see right here, we have reusable targeting, which is mostly from artifacts and stuff like that, as well as lands to be able to get around our requirement of being able to use mana. That way we can focus our mana into casting other creatures for aristocrat effects to then give Horobi a lot more value. Speaking of our reusable targeting here, we are starting out talking about Desert, Forage of Heroes, and Oasis. These all work very similar, but it gets more and more restrictive as we go. We're going to go with the least restrictive one. We have Oasis. It is a land that taps for no mana, but you could tap it to prevent 1 damage to any creature. And the text was changed. We go into here. It is prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to target creature this turn, meaning I don't need to be preventing any current damage in order for Oasis to kill it, because again, tapping it is an activated ability, thus triggering Horobi's ability. Desert is going to tap for colorless, but it will also tap to make it deal 1 damage to target attacking creature, and it can only be activated during the end of combat step. That way, even if someone's able to swing at us, we can then punish them for it by killing whatever creature is attacking us. And lastly, we have Forge of Heroes, which will be able to essentially destroy a commander upon casting, as you can tap it to choose target commander that entered this turn and put a +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature and a loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. Meaning that if a commander enters the battlefield, we get to immediately smite it to the command zone once again, allowing us to get around people with troublesome commanders or ones that are like Voltron and stuff like that. Next up, we have Shadow Alley Denizen. It is a 1 mana 1/1, but with the ability of whenever another plant creature enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains Intimidate until end of turn. So anytime a creature enters our battlefield, that as long as it's black, there are a couple artifact creatures in here, so they'll be colorless. When they enter, I get to essentially destroy a creature. Again, because Shadow Alley Denizen's ability will trigger Horobi. Next up, we have a little bit of a goofy one. We have Squeeze Toy. It is a 1 mana artifact to do the exact same thing as Oasis, to prevent the next 1 damage to any target creature. Again, I pretty much put in this for a little bit of like a joke. There's another card in here that's similar to Squeeze Toy in the reason why it's in the deck, because it's not a very good card. It's just a 1 mana damage prevention, but for 1 mana, being able to essentially destroy a creature every upkeep, every one of my upkeeps, just makes this a very valuable piece, while also being hilariously named. Next up, we have Liquid Metal Coating, which taps for no mana, but it does make a target permanent become an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. Essentially, it can make any creature that's not an artifact creature get destroyed. And I think it can also target artifacts. Like artifact creatures. I could be wrong on that one. But regardless, even if it's something that's not an artifact creature, which isn't very common in the command zone, it's going to be a great value piece, especially for only 2 mana. Speaking of 2 mana, we have Liquid Metal Torque, which taps for colorless, but also you could tap it to make target non-land permanent become an artifact. It's essentially liquid metal coating, but it's also a mana rock. And it does the exact same thing that liquid metal coating does, but it can't target lands. We have Scale of Chisgoria, Tooth of Chisgoria, and I think there's one. No, there is not. Scale and Tooth of Chisgoria, if I can speak, are both artifacts with affinity for artifacts as well as flash that tap for, which are 3 mana. You can tap it to make a target creature get +1/+0 until end of turn, or in Scale's case, +0/+1, or destroy target creature. Not a whole lot to say about this. You're essentially going to play it for free because, as you can see, there's a lot of artifacts in this deck. 17 to be exact. So, as long as I have 3 of my artifacts out on the battlefield, we are then immediately going to be getting these out for free. We then have Scuttlemutt, who is a 3 mana dork, but also taps to make a target creature become the color or colors of my choice until end of turn, or in other words, destroy target creature. Then we have Orc Sure Shot, which is going to be in a similar case as our Denizen up here, but for 4 mana to cast it. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under my control, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn, aka destroy target creature. Pretty much the same exact reason as Shadow Alley Denizen, but this is going to apply to even our colorless creatures, such as our next creature we're talking about, Inversion Behemoth. Essentially, at the beginning of my combat, I can board wipe, one-sided board wipes at that, as I can switch the power and toughness of each creature, of any number of target creatures until end of turn. It does not state that it has to be my own. So thus, Inversion Behemoth is a one-sided board wipe every one of my combats. I think this is probably the most valuable piece in the deck when it comes to being able to destroy creatures at a consistent base that's not at instant speed. There's a couple ones that are like that, such as Nefashu or Persistent Constrictor, that only happen at like an upkeep or whenever it attacks. Speaking of Nefashu, whenever Nefashu attacks, up to 5 target creatures each get -1/-1 until end of turn. That way, say my opponents each have 1 creature, I can just kill those 3 and not worry about it. Plus, it gives Nefashu some really great access to people's life totals, as being able to pretty much wipe out their blockers makes Nefashu very easy to get in to do some pretty good damage. It's a 5-power creature, so it's got a lot of weight on the battlefield. Persistent Constrictor is our next one here, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they lose 1 life, and I put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature they control. So pretty much they'll lose a life, and I destroy a creature of theirs. And if Persistent Constrictor gets killed, I then bring it right back. It does only happen once before, unless I can remove that -1/-1 counter, and there isn't any way to do it. But it's going to be able to come back at least once before I have to get some incursion on it. Next up, we have Staff of Nin, which is our most expensive artifact in the deck, but it also gets to draw us cards as well as consistent damage onto an opponent, or free creature destruction. The valuable part is the draw card at the beginning of my upkeep, just again, so I can get some reliable card draw, I get good damage, and it's able to protect me. Tetsamok is going to be our second to last creature in this section, or second to last card in this section. He is a 6 mana 6/6 with Death Touch, but we're not necessarily wanting to cast Tetsamok. as we instead want to use its ability in our hand to pay a mana and reveal Tetsamok from our hand to put a prey counter on target creature. While this can only happen during our turn, that's 1 mana to destroy a creature. I can use this ability as much as I want during my turn. And pretty much only as a sorcery. It's kind of, sorta, but it is able to be done at instant speed as long as it's on my turn. Lastly, we have one of our most expensive cards in the deck, and it's the reason why this deck is so expensive, is Cauldron of Souls. It is 5 mana to tap and choose any number of target creatures, and each of those creatures gains persistent until end of turn. This is where, if you're not knowledgeable in how Horobi works, this might not make sense to you. However, Cauldron of Souls ability will fizzle once Horobi's ability goes onto the stack. So that way the creature gets destroyed once it's targeted by Cauldron of Souls, and Cauldron of Souls will then have no targets, meaning that these creatures will never get persist, and you're able to just skip over, even potentially bringing them back from the graveyard. Moving on from that, we have our single-use targeting, and another card that's going to work similar to the Cauldron. We have Slaughter Pact, which is a 0 mana instant that destroys a target non-black creature. But at the beginning of my next upkeep, I have to pay 2 and a black, and if not, I lose the game. The only thing about this is that, again, once it targets a creature and Horobi's ability destroys it, Slaughter Pact will then fizzle, including the upkeep cost. For 0 mana, I get a creature removal. Easily the most valuable part of this deck in general. Just for the fact that 0 mana creature destruction is just absurd. Here we have another card that's going to work the same way, just so I can laugh at people who think that I'm about to make them indestructible, just to say, nuh-uh, Horobi's ability cancels that out. Armor of Shadows is a 1 mana instant. In fact, all of our instants are 1 mana, allowing us to very easily have open mana to protect ourselves. Eye Gouge is the other card when it comes to Squeeze Toy that I was talking about, where it came to, oh, silly, haha, funny card names. I just thought this was hilarious, is the fact that if it's a Cyclops, you destroy it. I don't think I've ever seen a Cyclops creature in any game of Magic I've ever played. So I just found this even funnier. But again, it was also 2 cents, so it's a really, really cheap instant that also adds flavor to the deck. Well, that is pretty much simple stuff. Disfigure, stab, both -2/-2. Lose Hope is -1/-1, but again, all of these are destroy target creature. Plus, Golem's Bite will allow me to get the ring to tempt me. Not like it matters, as the first tempt does next to nothing. But let's go on to the next one. We have Getting Around Hexproof and Shroud. You have Arcane Lighthouse, Detection Tower, Glaring Spotlight, Nowhere to Run, and Sudden Spoiling. Arcane Lighthouse and Detection Tower are both lands that are going to be able to tap for 1 colorless, and to tap it and until end of turn, creatures your opponents control lose Hexproof and Shroud and can't have Hexproof or Shroud. And Detection Tower is the exact same amount of mana to tap it, to then do the exact same thing, but only for Hexproof. Shroud's just a lot less common than Hexproof, so it's not too big of an issue. But it is something to note. You then have Glaring Spotlight, which is a 1 mana artifact to do the exact same thing, but a permanent effect, where creatures that my opponents control with Hexproof can be the targets of spells and abilities I control as though they don't have Hexproof. And then I can also tap 3 and sack it to make creatures I control gain Hexproof until end of turn, and make them unblockable. We also have Nowhere to Run, which is also going to be a single-use removal spell. And it has Flash, which will allow us to make a target creature in opponent control get -3/-3 until end of turn. And the effect of creatures your opponent control can be the target's spell's abilities as though it didn't have hexproof. But the important thing about Nowhere to Run is that it will make ward abilities not trigger, meaning that we could even get around ward. And then lastly, Sudden Spoiling is going to be a 2 black and 1 colorless split second instant to make all creatures target player controls lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 0-2. The only thing that's important about this is that it makes it lose all abilities, such as Hexproof, Shroud, and Ward, which is also going to be in the exact same way that Nowhere to Run is able to get around Ward. Sudden Spoiling will do the exact same thing. As I mentioned, Aristocrats is in this deck, very much so, and I wanted to focus around Aristocrat effects that were going to not be my own creatures dying, but of course, I kind of have to. That's why, like, Zulaport Cutthroat is in here, Bastion Remembrance is here, which are both the exact same thing. When a creature I control dies, each opponent loses a life, I gain a life. Although Zulaport Cutthroat counts for itself as well. The other ones are all going to be for all creatures here. We have Blood Artist, which is going to do the same thing as Zulaport Cutthroat and Bastion Remembrance, but for any creature, not just our own. Same thing with Falkenrath Noble. It'll be the exact same effect. Then we have Death Greeter, which is whenever another creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, whether it's ours or our opponents, I may gain a life. We have Sangromancer, which is going to gain us 3 life every time a creature an opponent controls dies. And whenever they discard a card, we'll also be gaining life. Syr Konrad the Grim is going to be the exact same thing as our aforementioned Blood Artist and Falkenrath Noble, but also applies to cards not in the battlefield. So cards that are in our opponent's libraries, or if a card leaves my graveyard, such as if I recur it with a spell, it'll make Syr Konrad deal 1 damage to each opponent. Massacre Wurm will give a -2/-2 effect to all of my opponent's creatures. But again, the important part is that whenever an opponent's creature dies, they lose 2 life. It's all very simple effects. Here are, like, we're going to go down and we're going to go talk about the creatures that themselves get either stronger or do other effects based off Aristocrat effects. Most of these are putting a +1/+1 counter on the creature anytime a creature dies, such as Slaughter Specialist, Feral Ghoul, Vashta, Yahenni, and Venom Crawler will all do the exact same thing. The only difference is that Feral Ghoul will only apply if a creature I control dies, and Vashta Nerada is only if a creature died this turn, and it affects at the end step. Then Yahenni is if a creature an opponent controls dies, same thing with Slaughter Specialist. And Venom Crawler is for any creature dying. We also have Mortivore, who will get bigger as we remove creatures and apply other type of effects onto them. Not necessarily an Aristocrat effect here, but it does apply a supportive role to our other Aristocrat effects. And then lastly, we have Ogre Slumlord, who will be pumping up our board by making 1/1 rats anytime non-token creature dies. Such as if we end up losing something like Yahenni or Feral Ghoul or something, we'll make rats. When we kill our opponent's non-token creatures, we'll make rats. Whenever we sneeze, we make rats, because again, we're in mono black, so we're killing everything as fast as possible. So rats. And we have our other Aristocrat effects here. The obvious ones, Pitiless Plunder and Black Market. We also have some recursion of our opponent's graveyards in Gisa and Grave Betrayal. Grave Betrayal does it instantly, or not necessarily instantly, but at each end step, where we'll then return a card. Whenever a creature that I don't control dies, I'll return to the battlefield under my control but with a +1/+1 counter on it at my next end step, making it a black zombie as well. And Gisa will do this at the upkeep, where all creatures exiled with her will be put onto the battlefield under my control with Decayed. And then, if a creature an opponent controls dies, I exile it. These are pretty much to steal our opponent's ETBs and attack effects with stuff like Solemn Simulacrum, or to counter other aristocrat effects by essentially getting a second copy of it. Then our last part is Shalab Dreadweaver, which also exiles a non-token creature when it dies. And then for 2 and a black, I could put a creature card exiled with Shalab into its owner's graveyard to put 2 +1/+1 counters on her and draw a card. Or for X, 1 and a black, we can put target creature card with mana value X exiled with Shalab onto the battlefield tapped under my control, allowing us to, again, recur our opponent's pieces or draw us cards. Speaking of recursion, which Shalab should be here as well, but we have Mortuary Mire and Witch's Cottage, which are both going to enter and return a creature card from my graveyard onto the top of my library, allowing us to recur something that dies, such as a Gisa or Pitiless Plunderer, Yahenni, stuff like that. We have Phyrexian Reclamation, which is a 1-mana enchantment where we could pay a colorless, a black, and 2 life to return target creature card from my graveyard to my hand, allowing us to, again, recur a bunch of stuff. Scrap Trawler is going to be bringing our artifacts back, such as our Squeeze Toy, to be able to cycle those through. If someone destroys one of our artifacts, we can bring one back to do the exact same thing over and over and over again. And then lastly, we have Victimize, which will allow us to choose 2 target creature cards in my graveyard to sacrifice creature, probably a rat, but realistically, we can sacrifice just about anything to return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. Not really need to explain this one. It's pretty much the same thing as stuff like Scrap Trawler, in that to just be able to recur our value pieces, such as our aristocrat effects, or, again, our repeatable removal. And I believe this is our last part. Yes, it is. We have our card draw. Other than like our obvious ones, War Room, Mind Stone, Commander Sphere, Morbid Opportunist. We also, and Phyrexian Arena. We have Harvester of Souls, High Society Hunter. I think those are the only non-token. Nope. Grim Haruspex. Whenever a non-token creature dies, I draw a card. The only one is that with Grim here, it is only going to be a non-token creature I control dying. Such as our Corpse Augur, which when Corpse Augur dies, I draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of creature cards in target player's graveyard, allowing us to sack them with something like our Squeeze Toy, to then draw a bunch of cards based on how many cards are in our opponent's graveyards, to be able to keep us up with the rest of the board. Midnight Reaper is another one with non-token creatures, in the same vein as Grim, where it's only creatures I control. We then also have Kothafed, which is whenever a permanent owned by another player is put into graveyard from the battlefield, I draw a card and lose 1 life. And then lastly, we have Dread Presence, which is also going to be a like a removal, constant removal piece, as whenever a swamp enters the battlefield under my control, I can either make it to deal 2 damage to a target and I gain 2 life, which won't end up gaining me any life because, again, the ability will fizzle, or to allow us to draw a card and lose a life. This is going to give us flexibility to determine whether we need to remove a creature or if we want to be able to draw more cards. And with that, that is all for the deck. I think that Horobi is a surprisingly interesting commander with a lot of effects that work well with either constant spell slinging or from, again, our reusable targeting, because there's a lot in this deck that allows us to take shots one after another on our opponents. We can do it at instant speed, we can do it at sorcery speed, we can do it whenever we want, we can kill whatever we want, whenever we want. It's control, it's aristocrats, it's group slug, not group hug, and it just is a lot of fun to do. You can then also swing Horobi for commander kills, or you can just go big with stuff like Yahenni or Feral Ghoul to then swing big, swing wide with our rats. There's a lot of flexibility to the deck. There's self-sacrificing with our reusable targeting that gives us more value, and there's just a lot to this deck that could definitely be built better with a bigger budget. There's a lot of cards that you could work with that do a lot more for a higher cost. But again, the entire reason why I made this series was to make really awesome budget decks. You know, stuff like our Jasmine Boreal of the 7 deck and stuff like that are like $20 to $30, or in this case up to $60, to try to hit any kind of bracket level or hit common bracket levels for a decent price. And that's, again, the whole point of this series. And that's why I constantly am asking for more recommendations, because there's a lot of commanders you can build really expensive that you could also build really cheap, and there's really cheap commanders you can build really expensively. And that's the cool thing about Commander, is that it is a game for everybody. And that's also the goal of this, to get people more involved with Commander, to get people more involved with Magic, and to kind of build this community up a little more. That is all from me, though. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. I hope you all have a wonderful day.